All right, guys. So I was just looking at some stuff. I had this idea in my head for a couple days, and I decided to look at some maps and stuff. You can tell if you look up here, I was looking at recipes for dinner tonight, but I was looking to see, just curious what all has changed. New maps have been uploaded. Where is the location of everything that we know of as far as, the temple and where Jesus was buried up here. They keep saying the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is where he was buried, and that Golgotha is like right down from it or right next to it. This is up on a hill. This is inside the old city of Jerusalem. He was crucified outside the city. Let's see right here. So go to this article here. And I'm not going to link any of this stuff. You guys can look it up yourself. I'm just throwing ideas out there, but I wanted to share it because it's interesting. And we're going to look at where the temple is too. I don't think the Temple Mount is it. Really don't, and I want to show you why. So, where is Golgotha today? The exact location where Jesus was crucified is disputed. In the fourth century, so this was um, after Jesus had been gone for 400 years, the fourth century, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built at the site of Golgotha as identified by Roman Emperor Constantine's mother, Helena. Now, if you know anything about Constantine and what happened with the church back at that time, I believe that's when the Catholic Church was started. Very interesting that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is a Catholic monument. Just saying. Scholars began to question this identification in the 19th century. However, since the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is inside the city walls of the present day old city of Jerusalem, Golgotha would have to have been located outside the city in accordance with Roman and Jewish customs of the time, and the Gospels to say that. He couldn't, and even prophecy, he couldn't be within the city. He had to be without the city, outside the city. So here's where the old walls are for the old city of Jerusalem. So here's the Temple Mount. We're going to get into the temple thing here in a minute. It's pretty interesting information. But look at the wall here. It goes up, makes a sharp turn, and goes this way. Wall goes up, makes a sharp turn, and goes this way. All this is all the old city of Jerusalem here, containing the old city of David right down here. We're going to look at that in a minute. But look at all this. This is the old city of Jerusalem. Up here is the garden tomb where Jesus was buried, outside the city wall. Now, of course, if you look at where'd the Holy Sepulchre one go? Here it is. So they say over here is Golgotha. There's no place of a skull here. This is up on top of a hill. This is way up, way up. It's impossible. Plus, it's inside the city walls. But if you look over here, you look real close. Place of a skull. Still looks like a skull to this day. That's the spot. Now, a lot of people debate about where he was actually crucified at, but there was a road that went by there. Ironically, a lot of the old roads are still there. This is, I think, a walking path now. So the tomb wasn't too far away from where he was crucified. Now, if you believe anything Ron Wyatt said, and I do, he detailed everything very clearly. He was either crucified underneath, because they have a seating area there now. He was either crucified underneath one of these two things here, because Ron found it. Jeremiah or Jacob's, was it Jeremiah? Jacob's grotto, Jeremiah's grotto. One of them is right in here. So he was crucified right here. So I think this is built on top of it, because they were hiding it, because he found three cross holes. Ironically, there's a little path that, actually, it's a little road goes right along through here, and then the garden tomb is right there. So this fits the biblical description quite specifically. And because it's outside of the city walls, which you can see them on the map right here. Just follow the line. That's where the Temple Mount was. And that is also on the map here, you can see. Quite clear. And this article goes on. I might link this in the description if you're just curious and want to read it. So yeah, this Holy Sepulchre, this is something made up. This absolutely is not the right spot. He wasn't crucified on a hill. I believe it says that he was crucified in a low place. Well, you can see this sits down below street level. This is a low place. So yeah, I think it's pretty undisputed. This is the actual location of where he was buried, and the tomb fits the description too. Now, here's what I wanted to share with you guys. Again, this is interesting, and I've talked about this many times in the past. I'm still recording here. Still recording. I am still recording. Very good. Okay. So, Dome of the Rock, Temple Mount. So, if you remember anything about the biblical description, what does it describe? A very uniform structure. Does that look uniform to you? I mean, it's almost a trapezoid. It's not even close to being uniform. Even this place where they have the Dome of the Rock sitting, it's not uniform. Now, I'll tell you from being in the military, you see these outlines? All that stuff is all old stuff that was there. This is Fort Antonia. This is all stuff that was there. So I can tell you just from my experience, you have barracks right here. This would have been officers' quarters because I think most of this building was still there. You have some storage or some eating areas here. Here's some, maybe a mess area or another officer area. You would have had armament, possibly more armament here, or a check-in area. This would have all been an open area for training and for addressing the troops. This would be in their area where they would all make formation. There's some steps going down to get out of that. There could have been barracks back here. This obviously, this could be training areas. I mean, this is laid out just like a military installation. So this is Fort Antonia. There's no temple that needs to go up here. What do you see right here? Let me pull back a little bit. So what do you see that's uniform right here? So see over here, Mount of Olives. This is the top of the Mount of Olives. You can draw a straight line right to this spot right here. Here's the Kidron Valley. I don't think the temple had anything to do with this. I think this is all Fort Antonia. Again, I'm not the one that's there. I could be wrong, but I'm just looking at what's in place. So here's the western wall where they all go pray. You do realize that's, you know, they're going to do this stuff as close to where they think the temple is as possible. Is it that they're doing this because the temple used to sit up here or over here, or because it used to sit right here? Now, I'm going to show you why I think this. This is the tabernacle and the basic layout of the tabernacle. Very uniform. Notice how all the corners and all the spots are all marked. Got the little pillars and everything up there. And what do you see right there? Does that not look like it is very well defined and marked out? Almost like they planted those trees on purpose to mark that spot. What is this? Is that just a sitting area? Or is that a praying area? This could have been about the right size for the temple. What, this is an old wall here. It's not part of the fort. The rest of it goes down that way. This is very uniform. Now, if you look real close here, you can see this looks like bathing areas where they would do ritual baths and cleansing. This looks like places where they might butcher animals. Just saying. Let me read you some scripture here. Paul arrested in the temple. Now, when the 7 days, this is Acts 21:27. Now, when the 7 days were almost ended, this is a little clue, but it jumps off the page when I read it. When the 7 days had almost ended, because read up verse 26. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, having been purified with them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification. So it was 7 days, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. This was after they talked about the Gentiles and what the Gentiles should do. Notice this is what they told here, Gentiles, you believers, you do this, and you'll be fine. Notice what it says. That's a different topic. Now, when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help. This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people, the law, and in this place. And furthermore, he also brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. For they had previously seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, with him in the city, whom they supposed that Paul had brought to the temple. Well, he didn't. He left him outside. And all the city was disturbed. And you see how the original city was. It wasn't very big, so everybody would have been pretty upset about this. All the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Now let's look real quick. At the temple. Look at that. Look at how square that is. Get some images here. Look at how square that is. Look at how that's laid out. Now they like to draw it, sitting on top of Fort Antonia. I think the site has been in plain sight this whole time. Look at this little, they draw these little buildings here, these little areas here. Notice, look at the little areas here. Almost like this is exactly where it was sitting right here. And the square, that perfect square of that temple right there. Now you could have outer courts up here, but just showing, just showing how interestingly it seems to parallel that one spot and not on the Temple Mount, because the Temple Mount isn't square. There's nothing about it that's square. And the Lord is very particular on how he wants this made up, and it is very, very drawn out very specifically and marked out in the Bible very specifically in its measurements. Where was that one picture at down here? Yeah, see right here, square, and then this extra area in the front here with all these other buildings and stuff. Again, we go back to the map. Square, and then the little area out in the front here. How interesting. Ironically, the old city of David is right down here, and this is David's palace right here. They built it they excavated it under his parking lot. I remember back in 2019, you couldn't even see this. This is all underground, and they've since excavated all of it. This is the old city of David right here. Notice what's right across the street from the city of David. This area right here. I'm going to show you something else that's going to jump out at you too on that, because the Bible talks about how it was built on top of the spring of Jeshurun, or the Gihon spring. So look at how closely this matches the pictures. You see that in the way it's laid out. It's like that looks more like the spot than anything, because on top of the Temple Mount, it doesn't even look like That's where it would have been sitting. They may like that, but I don't think that was the spot. I think it sat right here. This was the actual temple here. So the doors would have been shut. Now look at this. This is old walkway here. So the doors would have been shut when they took Paul out and took him out here. Now, check this out. Now, as they were seeking to kill him, news came to the commander of the garrison that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately, because the Romans were the ones that were governing everything, and he would have been the guy that was over, the one that was over the workings of the temple, and the only person would have been over him would have been the high priest. I had that brought up somewhere. I don't remember where that was at. I had it up a minute ago, or a few minutes ago. But the garrison guy was over that. He was second only to the high priest. So he was responsible for everything going on in that section of the city. And it's very interesting that some of your main structures are right here on that corner, where this very, very uniform structure is. Let's go back and look at the scriptures, because there's one little clue here. Verse 33, then the commander came near and took him. Oh, wait, I take that back. Verse 32, he immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. They ran down to them. So they went down to the temple. See, here's a major entrance right here. Pull back a little bit so it's a little clearer. Major entrance right here. There's stairs, stairs, stairs. All stairs leading down to this area. This probably would have been the outer court, or a place of where they were doing business to get people ready, or storing stuff for sacrificing here in the temple. Possible. But they ran down to them. Look at the staircases that are here to go down from here down to this area. So if they would have if this would have been the temple and Paul would have been in here, they would have taken him this way out of the temple or this way. And since this was supposed to face east, they would have taken him out here if this was the temple. They'd have shut the doors, they'd have walked him out here, and they'd have taken him out here away from the main temple court, out here to beat him. And they came out, the commander came out, and they ran down the stairs to him. The temple wasn't up here. This is Fort Antonia. The temple is down here. And here's David's palace, right here in the old city of David, that they just in the last few years have excavated. They also found somewhere under here, they've got it all blocked up, but you can take a tour of it now because they got it all reinforced to hold up the road and everything. But somewhere right along here is a walkway underground that goes, I think, right this way. Ironically, puts you right in place of this. How interesting. So you would have had your ceremonial cleansing somewhere down here. There could be some springs down here or something, and they would have walked straight up to the temple to do what they were going to do. Now, also interesting is the Bible says it was to be built, I think it was on top of or at the Gihon Spring. Well, nobody knew where the Gihon Spring was until about 2017, 2018, 2019. When some guys were on the Mount of Olives, and they looked across the valley and noticed water coming out of the side of the cliff, where they were excavating the city of David, the old city of David. All this, I think, is all old city of David. Well, they got over there, climbed up, and they said they climbed in, and I showed these videos in the past, climbed up inside this. There's a cave leading up here to the spring itself. And they said it goes a good ways up, and they think, and this is how they came to their conclusion. And they got a bunch of videos on it. I'll just see if I can find them again. I might link them so you can watch them. But they said it led up and led right to this area. And there was a free-flowing spring coming out of there. Now, they said there was another, it was flowing another direction. I don't know where that went. But they said it flowed right up here. And when they got to the spot where they think it was at, they thought this must be right under the temple, because they said there was spots set up and stuff carved where they could butcher animals and wash everything in the fresh water and then go and put them to take the stuff up for the burning. But they could wash everything up and all that after they butchered the animals. They found a complete spot. If I can find the video again, I'll share it in the description, and y'all can look at that and see, because it's very interesting. But they said it looks like it goes up underneath here somewhere. They think they were right around in here, which would mean this is where the temple actually sat. Again, we go back and we look at what they've drawn up. This is what they've drawn as to what it looked like. Look at how you've got, so let's go over and open this up. So here's your little outer buildings here. Structure, here's the big gate, structures. Now look at the map. See the structures? This was definitely a little tower section here. All these buildings over here. This would have been the gate going in and out. And again, you draw a straight line. Keep on going this way. And it goes right to the mount on top of the Mount of Olives right here. See? Mount of Olives. So it don't have to be over here looking out the east gate, which is funny because this doesn't even look out the east gate. They're calling this the east gate. Look straight out there. There's where they call Gethsemane. That's supposed to be Gethsemane historical place, but the actual place we were looking at is over here. That spot. How interesting. So, like I said, there's men smarter than me that know this stuff. I'm just looking. I'm just looking. Here's some more of the old city here. Here's the Western Wall area. They've been working on all of this here. All this stone here that they found is all Herodian stone. Maybe the temple was back here. I don't know. Doesn't look like it because it's not uniform. I don't know. Look at all the structures here. It's a very heavily well built up area. But the only thing I find in all of this, and once you see it, you can't help but see it. The only uniform area I find is right there. That's about a perfect square as you're going to get. Very interesting. Down here, here's the Kidron Valley. So the brook Kidron would run right through here. I don't know if it's seasonal or if it runs anymore, but this is where the brook Kidron would run through. Because if you follow it down, it turns into the Kidron River. Keep following it out. I don't know if there's any water up there or anything. Where the garden tomb was. But they did say he liked to cross over the temple, from the temple, and sit in the garden across the brook Kidron. Maybe over here somewhere. Don't know. Don't know. I'm just looking at it. I'm just looking at it, and see, there's the old city of David right in here. They're doing a lot of excavation. They found a lot of stuff. There's David's, supposedly David's tomb over here. I don't know why that's blurred out. And they don't want anybody to see that. So very interesting stuff when you take a look at this and look at it for what it is. And take your time, do your research, dig into scripture, Look at the descriptions. You start to see very interesting telltale signs here. Hmm, very interesting. And really, the only reason why they want the Temple Mount or the they want that is because they don't want anybody up anywhere near there. You know, they back then they didn't want the Romans there, but they didn't have a choice, so they want to get rid of everybody that's out of there. They want to have control of the whole thing, and they've been excavating up underneath it too, reinforcing it to hold more weight and stuff like that. You know, trying to make sure that that whole area where Fort Antony is won't fall down and collapse in on itself. But I don't think that's where the temple was. Not even close. That's just me. All the other places have stuff built on it. The only place that doesn't have anything built is this right here. They just have this little area right here to sit under or something. Interesting. So yeah, I'm just throwing it out there, guys. You know, sometimes we need to go back and look at this stuff just to remind ourselves of what we're looking at, what's going on. I know they excavated the pool of Siloam. I don't know where that was found. I'd have to go look up what they said about that. But yeah, I personally think this is probably where the temple actually sat, somewhere right in here. And even back in 2019, I talked about that, somewhere right here, because that's where that spring is, come out right down there in the valley. They said it goes up underneath here for a good ways, which would make sense because if the water's coming out this way, if the cave goes that direction, it would lead right up here. Ironically, it would lead right to this area. So who knows? And of course, whenever we look at where they say Jesus was buried, and that obviously does not fit the description in the Bible at all, because here's the city wall right here. There's Herod's gate. Here's the city wall of Old Jerusalem. And he was done outside. This all happened outside the city. Well, there's outside the city right there. There's the place of a skull right here. Look at street view, you can still see it. And then they crucified him somewhere right around in here where the cross holes were. I think underneath this. And then they buried him right over there. Interesting stuff. You know, the Lord's going to tell us all the truth when the time comes, but I just like to get on here and look at this every now and then and show you guys, you know, what they say and what's reality. Two very different things. Two very different things. But when I look at this, after being in the Army, look at this whole structure, that's 100% a military installation. The layout and everything it screams military installation. We will only know in the future. And you know, the temple they're about to build, it's irrelevant to us. But I do like to look at this and see, because we get a much different view of Scripture when we look at the actual layout of everything and know where these things are, and it tells us much more about the story. And especially when you look at the little tiny details, like when the commander of the garrison took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them, which means if he ran down to them, he wasn't going in a straight line on level ground. He was going down to where this place was, where they had him, which that means they ran down to the temple, which would be they would run down a hill or downstairs. There are stairs here, here, and it looks like some right in here. So if this was the temple site, which that's a perfect square, they would have drug him out, would have been beating him somewhere in here, over here, and so they ran down to stop. Very interesting stuff, guys. Just wanted to throw that out there.